Greenbrier was a town barely marked on the map, buried in the folds of a forgotten valley, where the air seemed permanently saturated with damp fog and regret. I arrived at dawn, the mist coiling around the narrow streets, like pale fingers reaching from the past. The buildings leaned in, old and neglected, their windows staring blankly, like the eyes of corpses long forgotten. I could already feel it, the weight of something left unsaid, something that watched, waiting. I'd seen towns like this before, places steeped in their own history, too stubborn to let go, too haunted to forget. But something about Greenbrier was different. It wasn't just the isolation, it was the quiet, an unnatural quiet, as if the town itself was holding its breath. I didn't know much about the deaths at that point, only whispers, bodies found in their homes, doors locked from the inside. No signs of struggle, no clear cause of death, just a common detail that sent a chill down my spine. Each victim was found facing a window, their expressions frozen in a silent scream, as if they had seen something that shouldn't exist. The locals were reluctant to speak of it, but I had seen enough to know when fear had taken root deep in people's bones. And fear like that doesn't come from nothing. It had been months since the last incident, but the town's eyes were still trained on the shadows, on the windows. Greenbrier was waiting for something to happen. They didn't know what, but I could feel it. As I checked into the Greenbrier Hotel, I caught sight of an old, weathered mirror hanging on the wall opposite the reception desk. The reflection it gave was off, somehow. It didn't show what it should have. And in that moment, I felt it too. Something unseen watching me from the glass. That's when I knew. Greenbrier had its secrets, and I was here to uncover them. Greenbrier wasn't the kind of place people came to by choice. Most who lived here had been born into its isolation, while the rest were trapped by circumstances they couldn't escape. For me, though, it was a job. I'd been hired by a client whose desperation came through in every word of the letter she sent. Evelyn Hawthorne, local historian, or so she claimed, wrote to me about a series of strange deaths that had gripped the town. She mentioned whispers of a curse, but didn't give details. I had a feeling she was holding something back, something darker than she was willing to admit on paper. I'd seen enough cases like this to know when the truth was buried under layers of fear and denial. People die in small towns all the time, but they don't die like this. The coroner's reports listed natural causes, heart attacks, strokes, aneurysms. But those final moments, captured on the victims' faces, told a different story. I needed to see for myself. After settling into the hotel, I walked down to the Rusty Lantern Tavern, hoping to loosen some tongues. The place was as worn as the people inside it. Flickering yellow lights, the smell of cheap beer, and damp wood clinging to the air. The bartender, a man named Henry McAllister, gave me a look that said he knew why I was here, but he wasn't going to make it easy. I ordered a drink and waited, letting the quiet murmurs of conversation wash over me. I caught snippets of talk, about the weather old grudges, but nothing about the deaths. No one wanted to acknowledge the elephant in the room. I asked Henry about the victims, careful not to press too hard. He was slow to respond, but after a moment of silence he said, "You're not from around here. Best if you didn't go stirring things up. What's done is done." His voice was low, almost as if he was afraid someone else might hear. I told him I wasn't interested in what was done. I was interested in what had started it. He wiped the bar with a dirty rag, eyes avoiding mine. "People here don't like outsiders meddling," he muttered, "especially not in things they don't understand." That's when I felt it again, that sensation of being watched. I turned, expecting to catch someone staring at me, but the room was just as it had been. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. It was like the air had changed, grown thicker, colder. I finished my drink and left, heading toward my next stop, Evelyn Hawthorne. Her house sat on the edge of town, an old Victorian relic with faded paint and ivy climbing up its walls. The fog seemed to cling more heavily around her home, as though the building itself was shrouded in something darker. Evelyn opened the door before I even knocked. She was a sharp woman, her eyes betraying a mind that missed nothing. "You must be Mr. Graves," she said, without preamble. "Come in." The house smelled of old books and dust, the kind of place where time seemed to stand still. She led me into a small study, shelves lined with volumes on local history, folklore, and notably, the occult. I asked her about the deaths, the expressions on the victims' faces, the fact that each one had died facing a window. "They saw him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I pressed her for details. Who did they see? She hesitated, eyes flickering toward the window, as if she expected someone, or something, to be standing outside. "The people here call him the Watcher, but his real name has been lost to time. He's always there, in the windows, watching. Those who see him don't survive long after." I didn't believe in curses, not really, but I'd seen enough to know that when people believe something strongly enough, it becomes real for them. Still, the way she spoke, the conviction in her voice, made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. "Why would he watch them?" I asked. Her gaze drifted to the window again, and for a moment I thought I saw something flicker in the reflection of the glass. But when I turned to look, it was just the fog. "I don't know," she admitted, "but once you've seen him, it's already too late." That was when she handed me an old, faded photograph. The image was grainy, but I could make out the outline of a tall figure standing just outside a window. The face wasn't clear, but there was something unsettling about the way it stood, motionless, almost blending into the fog. The picture was dated over 50 years ago. "Is this him?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Evelyn nodded slowly, her fingers trembling slightly as she withdrew the photo. "He's always there, Mr. Graves, always watching." As I left her house, the fog seemed to close in around me. The quiet streets of Greenbrier felt suffocating, like the town was a grave that had been forgotten. I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, just beyond the reach of my vision, he was there, watching. And if Evelyn was right, it meant I had already been seen. I've always trusted my instincts. In my line of work, it's what keeps you alive, keeps you from slipping down the wrong path and into the dark. But Greenbrier felt different. The air itself seemed heavy, like a warning, an invitation to turn back before things got worse. And after what Evelyn told me, I couldn't help but feel the edges of doubt creeping in. The Watcher. Something about that name gnawed at me. I spent the rest of the evening combing through the notes Evelyn had shared, studying the photograph of the tall figure outside the window. It didn't seem like much. Could have been a trick of the light, fog distorting the outline of a man. But that wasn't what was bothering me. It was the eyes, or rather, the lack of them. The figure's face was blurred, distorted, like a reflection on glass, just as a hand wipes it away. No eyes, just that faint smile, as though the face itself didn't need to look. It already knew what you were thinking, feeling, and that was enough. Still, I had to keep moving forward. There had to be a rational explanation. The next morning, I made my way back into town, heading toward the Ravens Hollow Library, hoping to find something in the old archives. Evelyn had mentioned the library's collection of records on Greenbrier's history. If there was any truth to this curse, or whatever it was, it would be buried there, hidden in layers of myth and half-forgotten stories. The library itself was an old building, one of the oldest in town. Dark, heavy wood, and high, dusty windows let in just enough light to see the shadows dancing in the corners. The air smelled of old paper and mildew, but it was the kind of place I'd always felt at home in. Places like these tend to hold secrets. The librarian, a man named Amos Crowley, was expecting me. His reputation preceded him, reclusive but knowledgeable. The kind of man who spent more time among books than people, which in a town like Greenbrier was probably a survival tactic. He greeted me with a nod and a suspicious glance, his eyes flitting over me like he was sizing me up. "I'm here for the town records," I told him, cutting straight to the point. "Specifically, anything related to deaths, strange occurrences, or folklore." Amos's eyes narrowed. "Folklore, huh? You looking to stir up trouble?" I ignored the jab. "I'm looking for answers." Without another word, Amos motioned for me to follow him toward the back of the library, where the town's historical records were kept. The shelves were cluttered with old, worn volumes and loose papers, some so aged that they looked like they would turn to dust at the slightest touch. "These are the records from the late 1800s, up until about 50 years ago," Amos said, gesturing toward the shelves. "You won't find anything newer. Things stopped getting recorded. After." "After what?" I asked. He didn't answer right away, instead shifting his weight from one foot to the other, as if debating whether to say more. Then, almost reluctantly, he muttered, "After people started disappearing. After they stopped asking questions." I watched him as he said it, looking for any sign of deceit. There was none, just a quiet resignation, like he'd accepted this as the way things were, maybe even the way they'd always be. I spent hours sifting through the records, my fingers growing numb as I leafed through brittle pages, each one filled with mundane accounts of daily life, property transactions, marriages, deaths. But every so often, I'd find something strange, a name crossed out, or a vague note about someone who'd left town without explanation. I made a list of every name that seemed suspicious, but there were too many gaps, too many missing pieces. Then, something caught my eye. A diary entry, dated nearly 70 years ago, written by a local priest named Father James Aldridge. The handwriting was shaky, the ink faded, but it described a series of visions, dreams, more like, about a figure standing outside his window. The entry was brief, but chilling. "I have seen him. He watches, and I know now it's not the dead who should fear him, but the living. He has come for me." The next entry was almost illegible, but I made out one word clearly: sacrifice. I took the page to Amos. "What do you know about this?" I asked, sliding it across the table. Father Aldridge mentioned seeing something outside his window. He thought it was watching him. Amos squinted at the page, his brow furrowing in recognition. "I remember him," he said slowly. "Father Aldridge was disturbed. Some said he'd lost his mind. Others said he was touched by something darker. He disappeared not long after writing this. Never found his body. Some say he went mad and wandered into the woods. Others think, well, they think the Watcher took him." There it was again, that name. "But you don't believe that?" I challenged, watching his reaction. Amos's lips thinned. "It doesn't matter what I believe. It's what the town believes that keeps them alive." I filed that away for later. There was more to this story, but I wasn't ready to push him just yet. I needed time to think, to process what I had found. That night, I returned to my hotel room, the eerie quiet of Greenbrier hanging in the air like a fog I couldn't shake. As I sat on the edge of the bed, going over my notes, I caught sight of my reflection in the old, worn mirror across from me. For a moment, I swore I saw a shadow move behind me, but when I turned, the room was empty. It was nothing, I told myself, just my mind playing tricks. But as I lay down to sleep, the uneasy feeling returned. The sensation that somewhere, somehow, someone was watching. I forced myself to close my eyes, but it was no use. The images from the diary, the blurred face in the photograph, Evelyn's warning, they all swirled in my mind. Something wasn't right, and deep down, I knew it had only just begun. The next morning, I would go back to Amos and push for more answers. But for now, all I could do was wait and try to ignore the feeling that he was watching me, even as I slept. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it, that unsettling, crawling sensation on my skin, like the air was watching me. It was absurd. I'd been in worse places, seen things that should have rattled me far more than an old town with creaky windows and a few deaths. But Greenbrier had a way of getting under your skin, gnawing at the edges of reason until you couldn't quite trust what was real and what wasn't. When I finally gave up on sleep, dawn was breaking, casting a faint, pale light through the window. That's when I saw it, the mist clinging thicker than usual, almost suffocating the streets below. The fog here never seemed to lift, but today it looked heavier, like it was trying to keep something hidden. I felt that same unease again, the kind you can't explain, but know in your gut is real. I needed answers. I headed back to the Raven's Hollow Library, hoping to catch Amos Crowley before the day got busier, though I doubted a place like this ever truly stirred with life. When I arrived, the library's heavy doors groaned as I pushed them open, the familiar scent of musty books and neglect greeting me. But this time, something felt different. The silence wasn't the comfortable kind you'd expect in a library. No, it was thick, unnatural. Amos was at his usual spot behind the counter, his face buried in a worn ledger. He didn't look up until I cleared my throat. "I need more than records," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You and I both know there's something wrong with this town." Amos closed the ledger slowly, his eyes narrowing as he studied me. "You're not like the others who came through here, are you?" His tone was guarded, as if he wasn't sure how much to say. "Most people see the signs and know when to turn back. But you keep asking questions." "That's my job," I replied. "And I'm not leaving until I get some real answers." He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose, the lines on his face deepening, as if the weight of the town's secrets had been dragging him down for years. "You think there's a reason why the rest of this place keeps quiet? It's not out of ignorance, it's survival." "Survival from what?" I asked, though I already had a good idea. He glanced at the window, then back to me. "You've already seen him, haven't you?" I hesitated. Had I? I hadn't seen anyone, but that feeling, the sensation that I wasn't alone, even when there was no one there. "I've seen enough," I answered, deflecting his question. "Tell me what you know about him." Amos stood up and motioned for me to follow him deeper into the library, past the rows of books, and into a back room I hadn't noticed before. It was darker there, colder, like the walls themselves were holding back something they didn't want me to find. "This town was cursed long before any of us got here," Amos said, pulling an old leather-bound book from a hidden shelf. "It started with a family, the Greywoods. They came to Greenbrier looking for a fresh start, but they brought something with them, something dark. People started talking about seeing figures in their windows, strange happenings at night. The Greywoods vanished after a few years, but the sightings never stopped." He handed me the book. Its cover was worn, almost crumbling under my fingers, and the pages were filled with handwritten notes, sketches of symbols, and crude drawings of a tall, thin figure, faceless except for a smile that stretched too wide. "They called him the Watcher," Amos continued, "but no one knows where he came from or why he's here. Some say he's a spirit, others a demon, but the truth is, no one's ever survived long enough after seeing him to find out." I studied the pages, my mind racing. The book detailed accounts of people disappearing, their homes left untouched except for one thing: a window open, even when it shouldn't have been. The same pattern, over and over, spanning decades. "There's more," Amos said, his voice lower now, as if even speaking of it might summon something. "People think they can escape him, but it's not that simple. Once you've seen him, he's marked you, and he won't stop watching." The room felt colder now, and for the first time, I felt a genuine sense of fear clawing its way up my spine. I wasn't a man given to superstition, but Amos was telling me these things with a conviction that shook me. "Why hasn't anyone tried to stop him?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Amos just shook his head. "You can't stop what you don't understand, and he's not just some ghost you can get rid of. He's tied to this place, to the people here. The more they try to ignore him, the stronger he gets." I left the library with more questions than I'd come with. The Greywoods, this Watcher, the curse. It was all connected somehow, but I couldn't yet see how. What I did know was that I was closer to something. Whether it was answers or something worse, I wasn't sure. As I made my way back to the hotel, the fog had thickened even more, swallowing the town whole. It was like the mist itself was trying to hide something from me, or maybe from everyone. The streets were empty, but the feeling of being watched never left me. I had to find Evelyn Hawthorne again. There was more she wasn't telling me, more she knew. But when I arrived at her house, it was eerily quiet. The door was ajar, creaking softly in the breeze. I stepped inside, calling her name. No answer. The house was dark, cold, far colder than it should have been. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the soft creak of the floorboards under my feet. And then I saw it. A window, just ahead, with the curtains gently swaying as if someone had passed by moments before. But no one was there. I took a step closer, my breath catching in my throat as I felt a presence behind me. Slowly, I turned, expecting to find Evelyn, but the hallway was empty. Still, I felt it, the unmistakable sensation of eyes on me. And that's when I realized the Watcher wasn't just outside anymore. He was inside. I stood there, frozen in place, every muscle in my body locked, as though something had seized control of my mind. The air in Evelyn Hawthorne's house was thick, suffocating, like it had been sealed in a tomb for centuries. The stillness wasn't natural, and I felt the weight of the eyes that weren't there, watching, waiting. That cold, familiar feeling prickled at the back of my neck, but this time it was worse. This time, the watcher wasn't just outside. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, the walls alive with anticipation. I could hear it, the faintest creak in the floorboards, the soft rustle of curtains, like something was shifting, moving just beyond my sight. The feeling that something was watching me was more intense now, but still, there was nothing in front of me, only that cursed window. Evelyn was nowhere to be found. I moved deeper into the house, my footsteps slow, deliberate. Every creak of the floor beneath me was like a scream in the silence. The house seemed darker than it should have been, the shadows clinging to the corners of every room, stretching longer than they had any right to. I couldn't tell if it was the fear creeping into my mind, or if something had truly shifted. I called her name again, but my voice came out weak, swallowed by the oppressive air. I searched each room carefully, but there was no sign of Evelyn. It was as if she had vanished, leaving behind only the lingering sense of dread. Then, I found her study. The room looked as though it hadn't been touched in years, despite Evelyn's insistence that she'd been researching the curse. Dust covered the surfaces of her desk and shelves, and the faint smell of old paper and decay clung to the air. Something was wrong. There were no notes, no documents, nothing about the Greywoods, the Watcher, or the deaths. It was as if her entire life's work had been wiped away. But there was one thing that stood out, lying in the center of her desk, untouched by dust or time, a small, cracked hand mirror. The sight of it sent a chill through me. I stepped closer, my hand hovering over the mirror's surface. I could feel the pulse of something dark emanating from it, like the mirror itself was alive, waiting for me to touch it. I didn't want to, but I knew I had to. The instant my fingers brushed the surface, the room seemed to close in on me. The air turned colder, and I felt that pressure again, the weight of eyes, the presence of something unseen. I lifted the mirror, tilting it slowly to look into the reflection. For a moment it was just me, my own tired face staring back, my eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. But then, just beyond my shoulder, I saw him. A tall, thin figure stood in the doorway behind me, his outline blurred by the mist that clung to him like a second skin. He was perfectly still, but his face, that smile, was all wrong, stretched too wide, too eager, like he had been waiting for this moment. I spun around, my heart hammering in my chest. The doorway was empty, but I knew what I had seen. I had seen him. I dropped the mirror, the sound of it shattering on the wooden floor reverberating through the house. The pieces scattered, but even in their broken state, I could still feel the Watcher's presence. It wasn't over. This was just the beginning. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I couldn't just wander around this house waiting for something to happen. If Evelyn was gone, someone else in this God-forsaken town had to know something. Amos Crowley, he'd warned me about this. He knew more than he let on. I had to go back to the library, find him, and make him tell me what he knew. But before I could leave, something caught my eye. One of the shards of the broken mirror was lying on the floor, reflecting the window across the room. the window I'd seen swaying moments before, but there was something in the reflection that shouldn't have been there. A figure. It was faint, but unmistakable. A man, standing just outside the window, watching. His face was obscured by the mist, but I could see the outline of his body, tall and thin, his head tilted at an odd angle, as if he were studying me. Without thinking, I rushed to the window and threw it open. Cold air hit me like a slap, but the figure was gone. The fog rolled in, thick and unyielding, swallowing the streets beyond. There was no sign of anyone, no footprints in the dirt below, nothing to suggest that anyone had been standing there. But I knew what I had seen. I left Evelyn's house in a hurry, the cold air biting at my skin as I stepped into the street. The fog was thicker than ever, reducing the world around me to a shapeless grey mass. Every step I took echoed louder than it should have, as if the fog were amplifying the sound. Or maybe it was just my nerves betraying me. The Watcher had shown himself, but why now? What had changed? I made my way back to the Raven's Hollow Library, practically kicking the door open in my rush. I needed to find Amos. If there was anyone who could tell me what was really happening, it was him. But when I stepped inside, the library was empty. Dark. The place felt wrong. Darker than it had been before. The light from outside barely reached the shelves, as though the fog had crept in with me, twisting the familiar space into something foreign. The silence was crushing. Amos was nowhere to be found. I moved through the aisles, calling his name, but the only answer I received was the echo of my own voice, bouncing off the shelves. The back room where he had shown me the old records was dark, the door half open, swinging on its hinges. "Amos," I called again, louder this time. Nothing. I stepped into the back room, my pulse quickening as I noticed something out of place. Papers scattered across the floor, books thrown from the shelves, and in the center of it all, a pool of blood. Fresh. Amos was gone. My mind raced as I knelt down to inspect the blood. It hadn't dried yet, which meant whatever happened, it had been recent. Too recent. As I stood, the familiar sensation crept up my spine again, that chilling feeling of being watched. Slowly, I turned to face the doorway, my breath catching in my throat. There, standing just beyond the threshold, barely visible through the shadows, was the Watcher. His figure was clearer now, more defined, the smile stretched impossibly wide. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just watched. I wanted to move, to run, but I couldn't. I was frozen, trapped under the weight of his gaze, and then, just as quickly as he had appeared, he was gone, vanishing into the fog as though he had never been there. Amos was gone. That much was certain. The pool of blood on the library floor was still fresh, and the eerie silence that followed his disappearance pressed down on me like a weight. My mind raced, connecting the dots. Evelyn's sudden absence, the blood, the Watcher. None of it made sense, yet it all felt like pieces of the same puzzle. I could feel the pressure mounting, the creeping sensation that time was running out. I stood there, staring at the spot where Amos had been, the metallic scent of blood lingering in the air. My instincts screamed at me to leave, to get out of this cursed town before whatever happened to Amos happened to me. But I couldn't. Not yet. There was something bigger at play here, something that needed to be uncovered, and I was in too deep now. The fog outside had thickened again, swirling against the windows like it was alive, as though it knew I was trapped in here, with no way out. The Watcher had shown himself twice now, once in Evelyn's house, and now here, lurking in the shadows. I didn't need to see him to know he was still watching, just out of sight, waiting. I needed answers. Steeling myself, I began searching through the mess left behind in the library's back room. The books and papers were scattered everywhere, but there had to be something here that could point me in the right direction, something Amos had been keeping from me. I sifted through the chaos, my fingers brushing against old ledgers and crumbling documents. Most of it was useless, dull records of daily life in Greenbrier, financial accounts, birth certificates. But then I found it. A small, leather-bound notebook hidden beneath a stack of torn pages. It was worn, its edges frayed from years of handling, and when I opened it, the faint scent of mildew rose from its pages. The handwriting inside was cramped, messy, as though the author had been in a hurry, or desperate. It belonged to Amos. I recognized his sharp, uneven scrawl immediately. He had been keeping notes. About what? I wasn't sure yet, but as I flipped through the pages, a pattern began to emerge. The first entries were simple observations, strange occurrences, whispers of the Watcher among the townsfolk, mentions of old rumors about the Greywood family. But as the entries progressed, they became more frantic. Amos had written about sightings, windows left open, curtains swaying when no wind blew, and always the feeling of being watched. But then, the final entry stopped me cold. He watches, not just outside, inside now, always watching. Evelyn knows more than she's saying, but I can't trust her. I can't trust anyone anymore. He's closer. I don't think I can run this time. It's too late for me. There was a smear of ink where the pen had slipped, as though Amos's hand had been shaking while he wrote. Beneath it, a single phrase scrawled hastily in the margins. Find Greywood Manor. It's where it all began. Greywood Manor. The name struck a chord, something Evelyn had mentioned in passing but never elaborated on. It was an old estate on the outskirts of Greenbrier, long abandoned and left to rot. From what I'd gathered, the Greywoods had been one of the town's founding families, but their name had become synonymous with darkness, whispered in hushed tones by those who still remembered. And now it was clear. The Watcher, the curse, the deaths, it all traced back to that house. I folded the notebook and pocketed it. If there was any hope of understanding what was happening, it would be at Greywood Manor. But as I turned to leave the library, the door creaked open with a slow, deliberate groan. I froze. There, standing in the doorway, was Sarah Brooks. Her eyes were wide, wild with fear, and her clothes were disheveled, as though she had been running. The look on her face told me she had seen something she couldn't explain, something she was running from. "Sarah," I said, keeping my voice calm, trying not to startle her. "What happened? Why are you here?" She stepped inside, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of a bookshelf for support. He's here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He's everywhere." I moved toward her slowly, keeping my steps measured. "Who, Sarah?" "The Watcher." Her eyes darted to the window, her body shivering, as if the cold from outside had reached her bones. "I saw him," she breathed, her voice cracking. "In the windows. Every time I look, he's there. I tried to leave, but there's nowhere to go." I could see the fear in her eyes, the raw panic that clawed at her every word. She was losing control, slipping into hysteria. I had to ground her, pull her back to reality, before she lost herself completely. "Sarah," I said, my voice firm, but not unkind. "Listen to me. I've seen him too. I know what you're feeling, but we're going to figure this out, together. You're not alone." She looked at me then, her eyes searching mine for any trace of hope, any sign that she wasn't as doomed as she felt. For a moment, her breathing steadied, and the tremble in her hands subsided. "Greywood Manor," I told her. "That's where we need to go. Whatever this thing is, it started there." Her eyes widened at the mention of the house. "No," she said, her voice a fragile whisper. "Not there. You can't go there." "Why not?" "They say the house is cursed," she replied, her voice hollow. "Anyone who goes there, they don't come back." Her words hung in the air, the weight of them pressing down on both of us. But I had no choice. Greywood Manor was my only lead, the only place that could give me the answers I needed. "I have to," I said quietly. "Whatever this is, it's tied to that house. And if I don't stop it..." I didn't need to finish the sentence. She knew. We both did. We left the library together, the fog still clinging to the streets, and began the slow walk toward Greywood Manor. The air had grown colder, the kind of cold that bites at your skin and makes you feel like you're walking through a graveyard. Sarah stayed close to me, her eyes darting to every window we passed, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The town was deathly quiet, the kind of quiet that only happens when something is terribly, terribly wrong. As we reached the outskirts of town, I could see the outline of Greywood Manor rising up through the mist like a blackened skeleton. The house was massive, its windows dark and hollow, its roof sagging with the weight of time. Ivy crawled up the sides of the house, choking it like a noose. The gates were rusted, hanging open, as though welcoming us to our doom. And yet, despite the cold gnawing at my bones, I couldn't help but feel the pull of the place, the dark, unspoken promise of answers that waited inside. But as we stepped through the gates, I felt it again. The Watcher. He was near,